Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm David, that's Sean, my co host. And today, Sean is going to be walking us through how he does vibe programming. So, we've shown you on this podcast, at least maybe a month and a half ago, an example of this. And today, Sean's going to show you how he does what he does and how he works. And I think it'll be pretty interesting for you. As always, please put any comments or questions in the comment box. We'll do our best to answer those questions as they come in. If you have any questions after the live is done, say you're seeing this on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever you're watching this from, simply just put comments in the comment box and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can. All right, so with that being said, let me try to add this here to the stage. Let's see. For some reason, I only have a remove button. Here we go. There we go. All right. Go ahead, Sean. Take it away. Tell us how you do your vibe programming.
Thanks, David. So there are many tools out there and IDEs that integrate with AI, large language models, and help you program. You know, Cursor and Windsurf, which Windsurf was just bought by OpenAI for billions and billions. Those things are available and out there for you. And if you want the tool to dictate your process, those are great tools to do that. But developers are like snowflakes, and here I am, the snowflake, telling you how I'm doing it my way. So David kind of showed you where traditional programmers use IDEs and how that experience is. But I wanted to be able to show people that A, you don't have to do it that way, and B, I do things differently. So for the most part, when I work on things, it's usually much smaller in scale. It's more of the proof of concepts. I'm creating a prototype. So IDs definitely make sense if you have a very large code base that you're working on, and then you are adding the 5 cents to the dollar of value on a monthly basis. Where I see a lot of value in vibe programming is really the complete opposite, which is understanding a business problem, creating a software solution, and implementing it in a proof of concept pilot perspective with very little time so that I can iterate. The way I provide value, or the way I recommend people provide value, is through rapid iteration. What's the problem? Okay, let me put a solution. Let me measure the outcome, and what's the delta, rinse and repeat until I have achieved the overall outcome that I'm looking for. So, your mileage may vary. There's plenty of different sayings that you can use, but that's the basic that I want to start from. My requirements for vibe programming may be very different from yours. And I thought it was a very good conversation to have about being different. Now, David, I'm sure, could tell everybody how different I am. But,
in our own way.
I talk a lot about shifting left in your processes. If you are spending all your time trying to figure out where the weird colon is, or semicolon, in the code, you're spending a lot of time for very little value. Where if you move left and then you look at a problem, understand the architecture, create those milestones, right? Set up your code base and where you want to store everything. Because, shocker alert, I'd say every month I have a VM blow up on me. So you want to constantly be using these tools. documentation, record the prompts that you're using because you'll probably have to reuse them again. Be smart about it. Make sure you have, as you're going along, generate the documentation that you need. Have a process where your outputs are constantly being generated, and that's a good thing. And then using the AI for code generation, test generation, troubleshooting. This is very common, and we'll go through these today, but having a test bed. So let's start from the beginning, right? My number one first step is research. And I'll show you how I research here when we get to the demo section. But understanding what you're trying to do and what is good. What is a touchdown, right? Touchdown 6 points, hopefully 7 points. So make sure that you have your goal in mind. Make sure you understand. Ask AI these questions. What's a good architecture? Once you understand, okay, I want this type of database. I want this type of web server. Maybe it's what you're comfortable with, but ask AI because if there is a better mousetrap, you should use the better mousetrap. Again, my roots are in MySQL, Perl, and PHP, and Linux. That doesn't mean that those are the best for every solution. And again, when we get into this, you may see that divert. But having a vision of how to solve it, document that vision, have some visibility with this. Share this with your colleagues. Again, me and David, I think, consult with each other regularly. Hey, these are ideas that I have. What do you think? And some of those ideas, you end up being a bit myopic. Drinking your own champagne is a great thing to do, but don't get drunk on it. So having somebody be your designated driver when you're drinking your champagne is a good idea. Even if you're a solo crazy man like myself, having these people to check your worst sensibilities is great. This is why peer review of code is so important. Understanding how you're going to get there. So once you have, and this icon is Lucidcharts. So I use Lucidcharts to explain that architecture. It helps me understand, here are the Legos that I can build my Death Star with. On the Agile side, this is where Atlassian comes in. Maybe you'll just use a notepad with a bullet list. And I think the demo I have here is pretty simple, where that's the route I go. But understanding what is the minimum viable product? What is it that if you can't get this done in very short order with low effort, it's probably not a solution worth solving. It's not a problem worth solving. The juice is not worth the squeeze. This is the reason why a lot of business problems are never solved, is because the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But because of Vibe Program, because of AI, that ball is getting pretty big. Yeah. David, do you have any comments?
No, I think you definitely hit the nail on the head. And I think this is where we're hitting a time where the culmination of ideas can just come from the fire hose, and things can be very quickly validated, tested, moved on, approved, gone to the next level. You're going to start seeing a lot of great projects, a lot of great products hit the market at a scale of pace that you've never seen before, because the constraints of having people to create this time, money, effort. But now everything is so ubiquitous. You have this idea, you go through everything Sean just said, you produce something, you test it. Yes, it's an MVP. Yes, it's not going to solve every single aspect of it. But if you're trying to gain capital, or you're trying to gain buy-in from senior executive leadership or management, or put it into terms. A lot of times I run into this a lot, even if it's just a design. People don't know what they like or don't like until they see something tangible. And oh my God, then they have all the feedback in the world. And you're sitting here, hey, where were you 3 weeks ago when I started this whole process? You had nothing to say and it was all crickets. But that is just the nature of the beast. People don't really have any input until they have something to give input on. And this is where the game has completely changed.
Yeah. And so while other people are like, okay, Sean, you need windsurf, you need cursor, you can see I have a plethora of tools that I need to do. There's deep research. That's what I use Gemini for deep research. I'll show you that. The Lucid charts. I don't use Visio anymore. Sorry, Microsoft, but I like my online tools. Some people use Miro, so that you can list things out. I like the Atlassian suite, so whether it be Jira, whether it be Confluence, etc. But, that may be overkill for your project. But I like it. GitHub is absolutely ubiquitous. I don't know anybody out there who does code repositories that uses something other than GitLab or GitHub. We've talked about this tremendously about AI models. Variety is the spice of life, right? And then I like to do all my development and testing on Ubuntu. Now, can I integrate all this together so that it is a complete automated engine and it's perfect? Yeah, I could. But I go and I solve so many problems. Why would I fixate on the tools or the process when I should be fixating on the problem and the solution? So again, different perspectives, different roles, but this is how I do it. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When it comes to models, you date, you do not marry. I believe that it makes sense to get multiple different perspectives because, number one, it'll teach you about AI. If you ask 5 different models the same question and you read through all the answers, one, you will know what problems to take to what models, and then you will also get a far larger perspective. Now, there's some models like, ChatGPT 03, 04, and 4. GPT-4, all these different OpenAI models are kind of trained the same, so you're not going to get that much of a variety. I like to go between the different vendors. If they're going to give me free queries on their models, I'm going to take advantage of the situation because, again, I'm not using that much. If you're married to a cursor or what have you, you may be hitting that model 5,000 times in a day. And that's going to consume a lot of tokens. But when I'm in the research mode, I may be running one very large query on all 5 platforms doing a deep research and then spending hours researching and deciding this is the course of action. I love asking the large language models, which large language model is good for Python, which is good for MongoDB, which is good for Perl, whatever language that you're choosing. Make sure that you have a real good reason why, and then make sure that you focus in on the code generator that is the best with the code. And then, test it out yourself. I mean, I'm not saying do a hello world, but, when you ask it to generate code, ask it to generate code from 3 different locations and look at the difference. And, it's like you're hiring developers, right? How do you hire developers? You ask people to write code. You give them a problem and you say, show me code that does this. And then you look through their code. And then you hire the developer based upon the quality of code that you get from them. Well, the same thing's true with large language models. Make sense, David?
It does. One of the things I actually use when you were talking about research, I use as many of the cheap free models that I can, but I personally like Perplexity for just asking research level questions. It helps. It saves me a lot of time. Excuse me. The other thing too that I noticed that as we spoke before, Sean, you use Open Web UI. I think is that what it is? Yeah. And one of the features in that UI UX at the top left corner, almost center, you can add multiple models at the same time, ask one question, but yet you'll get the output from n number or however many you've selected all at the same time. So if any viewers are wondering how you do what you do and try to save a lot of time in that, that's a way of asking the question once, but getting the output, multiple outputs, all from a single question. So it can be quite not as laborious. So if you're thinking you have to just go from this UI to that UI to that UI, cross compare, that can get a little clumsy and messy, but there are tools out there like Perplexity and Open UI, Web UI that really make light work of it. So use them as much as you can for sure.
Yep. Date, don't marry, as I say.
Yep.
Wait a second. Not sure. Can you see that it's changing?
Not yet. You'll have to share your desktop. I always had a problem with that earlier too.
No, I was just switching to the next slide and it's not pulling up.
Yep. Let's see here. Well, remove it from stage. We'll add it back and we'll see if magic happens. It's actually spinning. So usually the demo gods are the one to come and curse us, but the presentation.
Well, to be honest, the next one was effectively a demo. So let me go through and see if I can present share screen. And let me see if I can share. Hopefully you can see Gemini.
Yep.
So here's a query that I've got set up. So what I want to do is for my demo here, and let's see. Yeah, it certainly is not. Copy paste isn't even working today. Let's see. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So let me evidently copying and pasting from the PowerPoint is not working for me today.
One of the things I do when I get stuck like that is grab Notepad++ or Notepad or something and try to paste it into there.
That's what I'm doing.
There.
So help me understand the architecture complexity best practices of spidering lists of websites to get contact information, specifically email addresses. So one of the things that we talk about what AI can do is not always necessarily the more ethical things. And I wanted to show you how easy it is to do these kind of things as a reminder for everybody who has websites. Don't put your contact information on websites. That's what contact forms are for, because how easy it is to do these type things. So just wanted to show how you can click the deep research button. If you all have not used deep research, it's available on Gemini. It's available on ChatGPT for free. Perplexity has similar functionality. And what it does is it goes through and spends a lot of time figuring this out. It'll research all the websites and it'll start processing this. And then it does all the researching for you. Now, I can go over here and here is ChatGPT and I can do this. And you could do 5 of these a day.
Still seeing Gemini.
Oh, still processing. So we'll let it work on that, and I will switch to another tab. And here we go. Hopefully you can see ChatGPT now.
Yep.
So how many websites? Thousands of websites. And I have a list. Are you looking to extract emails from a single page? Any page with email is what I'm looking at finding. I prefer Python, but open to whatever is easiest. I want to ignore any patches. So let's see. And you can see it's going through and just researching, and it'll get back to me. And it gives me basically a white paper. So imagine, if you will, you had a group of interns or grad students who
BAs.
do your bidding, right? And they will crunch through this, and it may be 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. It may not even be over by the time we're done here. But you need to think of what you're doing from the shift left methodology. We need to understand what we're doing clearly before starting. Is this a problem worth solving? That is always the first hurdle to get over. And you can see Gemini, and so we'll stop the share there and move over to really, let's see if the next thing that I want to talk about is, understanding the architecture. So one thing that, let's just say we're just going to have an input that's in a JSON file. So let's stop share here, and then let me share. Open Web UI. So here's the Open Web UI. This is running on my local network, so I can do whatever I want. Why I like this is that sometimes I hit a guardrail, and it's like, I'm not going to let you even explore that. So you can get uncensored large language models so that you can ask any question you want. So I can go through and say, hey, write me an example JSON configuration file for input of websites. So I think of every problem as inputs and outputs. So I start with, what's the problem, how to solve it, what's the architecture, what are the things that you need to be worried about? I want to clear that hurdle. Is it worth my time? Then the next, I want to talk about what's the inputs and outputs. What's easiest for me is usually creating some kind of input configuration file that I can generate. So I can give an example format like I'm generating right now back to AI and say, give me 50, take the Fortune 500 websites. Here's the configuration file. Populate this configuration file with the Fortune 500 list. And it'll do that for me. I can go through and give it instructions like I was talking to an employee. I was talking to David right before here, and I was talking to a CTO last week. And he was saying on how he doesn't get this. And I'm like, the value is you could go through and write down all your instructions, spend 10 minutes saying, this is what I want. And then you can give this to the model and have it spend hours and hours figuring this out for you. And then you could come back like a manager and verify, okay, this is, I like this, I don't like this, change, change that. And they're all different conversations. So I can go through and just add new chat, and put in 10, 15 things and have it just start processing, go to sleep at night, wake up in the morning, and it did all this work for me. So, AI could very well be your next offshore contract, if you will, if you know how to use it properly. So, and I can, copy this file, and that is what I'm going to do. And behind the scenes here, I am going to, let's see.
Sean, while you're working on that, I wanted to make one comment too to what you were just talking about. So for those folks watching, either live or after the fact, one of the interesting things that Sean just showed here and had a conversation about was think about also your backlog. One thing that I used to hate being a Scrum Master was to groom the backlog, especially in a extremely large organization or a very large piece of public software that you're selling. And it's like drinking from the fire hose. So simply using AI to comb through the backlog, look at the requirements, break down your epics into stories, tasks, blah, 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 blah. This has completely changed the game. So if you're not using it in that capacity alone, you're really, really, really missing out.
Yeah. So inputs and outputs. The input is that configuration file, and the output I want is a Mongo database, right? And I say, hey, these are the, what's a table schema for this? So, you could see I asked a question, and you see the answer that I got. It's like, this is why different models matter. So if I were to switch over, let me go through and stop my screen, and I'm going to present. Let me go over to Claude. And you can see things happen a little bit faster online when you're using other people's resources, right? So and let me look at the Mongo configuration, and I'm just going to create another artifact like this. So every time I create an artifact, I'm going to be committing it to GitHub, and then just iterating and iterating. And so now what I can do is I can go through, hold on, and let me add in the two files that I just did. Let me represent now. So now that I've added those two artifacts, I can then just tell it, combine everything. Create me a Python script using the attached examples website JSON, and that spiders the websites, store the resulting in a Mongo database using the attached MongoDB Mongo text schema, right? And then it'll generate the first version of code. So the way I do my vibe programming, it is all about the artifacts. I will create an artifact like an input or an output. And that's where I'll start. And then I will create the code as the next artifact. And then I'll test that code. And then if I get an error, I can always go through. These chats have limited amount of tokens. So you could just run out of daylight here. But if you keep the artifact, right, you could just take and stand on the shoulders of the giant you've already made and say, hey, here's the code, here's the error, here's what I was trying to do, give me an update. And again, Cursor and Windsurf do this for you to a certain extent. But I like things to be a lot more controlled by me, not the IDE. So that's the differences that I are certainly in. And I would ask, before we move on, let me go through and present back what the research did. So hopefully you can see this. And you can see it's still churning away. It went to all these different websites. And you can see it just finished. So literally took, 20 minutes? 20 minutes to do. And now it's giving me a full understanding to the nth degree of what would be a good idea, right?
And why?
And then, again, I have an artifact. I can go through and I can export this and I can save it. And when I talk to any other large language model, I can carry that with me and say, okay, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, this attached file. What about this? What about this? What about this? Right? So I find the chat experience to be very restrictive. And so I highly recommend making sure that you keep these artifacts. Now, let's go through and show you what our good friends at ChatGPT had to say about it, right? So they came back in 4 minutes. So ChatGPT did the deep research in 4 minutes versus 20 minutes for those who are counting. But the idea here, and I know I'm jumping all over the map, and I may be losing some of you, but the idea here is if you want to maximize your control outside of an IDE, it is certainly possible. Maybe I can get the presentation up. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So just to kind of reiterate what I showed you as starting with the vision, understanding the what. So I did the deep research, right? And I'm like, okay, I want to do Python. I want to do a JSON. I wanted to push it into a MongoDB. I look at the architecture. Okay, I have these things. I have the inputs and I have the outputs that I understand. And then I want to do code generation, right? I want install get in Python. I want to commit the configuration file. I want to create a test list of websites, ones that I know will be easy, that will be hard, that won't have any. Create a Python script, start testing. And then it is iterative. Once you have the basic cases worked on, then you can get into the more advanced cases. Use AI to increase those AI cases. So that's the basics on the demo. Wow, PowerPoint just not having a good day. So customization is really where I live. because I think the process and the technology must fit the individual or group, right? People, process, tools, in that order is where my mind's always at, because it doesn't matter how great a process or technology is if people aren't using it or trying to subvert it. Shifting left, understanding what you want to do and is this problem worth solving? It may not be, but having something and having a good understanding and allowing reality to have a vote in your solution process is key. And then document everything. Your artifacts are your friends, right? It is a lot easier to just give the AI, like, look, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's the background that I've done. And just like treating it like an employee. If you hire somebody and say, look, here's the white paper on what we're trying to do. Okay, now that you understand that, now here's what we're trying to accomplish. This is the phase of what we're trying to do. Here's the inputs, here's the outputs. Create something that matches the two with this concept. Makes it a lot easier. So, I'll pause there. Did this make sense to you, David? I mean, I know I'm a snowflake when it comes to some of this, but I think it's important to let people know there's different ways to surf here.
No, that's true. I think you did a really good job of covering it. And Sean's not a developer in any traditional sense. He works with a lot of developers. He reads code. So I know a lot of you watching this, especially in leadership, you may not be from a development background. And so what Sean's able to do is simply just validate an idea without even having to hire or have a development team. I don't know if anybody picked up in on that, but the possibility of what is possible from the C-suite level, even just people with a big picture, big idea, you guys can now do a lot of these litmus tests, answer these questions yourself, dig deeper, and then create the artifacts, as Sean was talking about, and then disseminate that information downstream rather than have, I'll give you a good use case or a real world use case. In a Fortune 100, 500 company, if any leadership was to go to the team who's typically and already snowed under with more work than they can handle, if an executive, the loudest wheel gets the grease, and in this case, the higher up in the technical within the org chart that the ask comes from, is going to give precedence to what is currently happening. So imagine you throw out a squirrel for people to chase, and all of the things that are super important are now getting pushed to the back burner because everybody's scrambling because of this ask. The point here is that you can validate a lot of the questions that you have yourself using AI. If you feel as something is important enough to disrupt the current whatever's in progress, then you can go ahead and reprioritize that. But you'll have all of these artifacts. You'll already have a jump start on where it needs to go. And then when you have the development teams, and this is one of the things that we've been struggling with for probably the last 30 to 60 days, is describing the difference between vibe coding and AI-assisted programming. One is more pro code. That's the AI-assisted programming. Because if you tell a developer, a seasoned developer with 15, 20 plus years of experience, here, have some AI and do some vibe programming, to them, they're going to be super offended because they know what they're doing. They don't want to use AI in that way. Now, there's a lot of ways that they can accelerate, but vibe coding, that's almost a 4-letter bad word. For people that have never written code, what Sean just walked through, iterating, testing, it was spitting out a bunch of gobbledygook and jargon, maybe not as important except for the grab the artifact. So there's something tangible to use with the AI or to use with the team. It's too different paradigms. And so what I originally showed was the more geeky version of this. What Sean showed was the more executive level version of this. Also, anybody in between can use. It's all different types of perspectives in order to be able to do this. One thing that I'll leave you guys with is a little nugget. I'll share my screen and show this. I had just sent this over to Sean, and he was super busy, did not have a chance to look at it. But this is something relatively new, literally within the last 2, maybe 3, 4 weeks, let's just say a month. This is a tool. And everything that Sean was showing, this is almost going to give you a kind of a single pane of glass here. This is another fork of VS Code. If you're not familiar with a fork, it just means it's Visual Studio Code. And so now I have this downloaded, and I'm showing you the settings. I have this thing connected to Anthropic with my Anthropic key. I have it connected to OpenAI with my OpenAI key. I also have a Llama running on this local machine that you see this running. I also have LM Studio running also on this local machine. And so now when I get into I'll close out the settings. Now when I'm in this, Sean was talking about he wants 100% granular control. And so for Sean, he would stay in this chat mode. It's not going to touch your files. It's not going to generate anything except for in the chat window. It's up to him to copy and paste the artifacts over. Here, it's a very manual process, but it keeps everything packaged together. If he doesn't like GPT 4.1 and he wants to test something from Llama, like Code Llama or whatever the case may be, he can switch over to that. You can start new conversations. You can do whatever. But the point is, it's all now coming together. It's like drinking from the fire hose. There's never going to be a shortage of tools. Just as soon as you wrap your head around anything, they're going to pull the rug out from underneath you, and there's going to be 20 more great tools. So
and that's a good thing for us. That's a good thing. To me, my personal belief is the more AI options you have, the better for everybody. Right? Because if one of them is going to get sentient, you have the other ones to fight it with. I mean, joking aside, it comes down to variety is the spice of life. You do not want to be Coke versus Pepsi in the AI world, right? You want splintered functionality as much as possible. This is why Hugging Face has thousands and thousands of large language models in it, because everybody has their own little twist, and it takes a seasoned technologist or digital transformation leader to know where to use what when. And that is what's in my skill bag, is to understand and figure out first, then understand it, and then teach it to people what to use, when to use it. Because you don't use a hammer to open a glass jar, right? Everybody should probably know that. But, you can ask my kids and they think it's a great idea, right? So if you don't want to pick pickles up off the floor like I have, you probably want to work with somebody who understands the technology and where it applies best. And that is really David and my day job. Yep. So really appreciate everybody's time today. And I'd love to hear your feedback on this. I'd love to hear when I'm wrong. Again, I walked through all this stuff and David's like, hey, you should try this tool. That is really exciting for me. So, leave a comment, help keep the conversation going, because this is going to get crazier and crazier. My new saying is software is like tissue paper, because that is how often you're going to see changes in software. And to the people who are afraid of it and they're developers, you need to understand that software is going to be the language of our kid life. So, you will be part of that. We will all be part of it.
Yeah, software is going to literally become, to use a geeky term, ephemeral, that it is just temporary. It is here and will do what it needs to do, and it's gone. So a lot of these AIs are going to get so quick, so fast. So everything that they do, it's going to write the code, execute the code, delete the code. The software was here and it's gone that quick. So this is where everything's headed. So buckle up.
Adaptive software. Yep.
We're here.
That concept is firmly becoming a reality.
And we're definitely going to help you walk through all of this. We're here every Wednesday to kind of give you the flavor of the week, so to speak. And so we'll see you next Wednesday where we'll pick this all up again and we'll continue that conversation. And we hope that you guys too as well. Leave us a comment in the comment below and check us out on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Have a great show. Bye-bye.